Hello, I'm Morag, and welcome to this episode of Sense Making in a Changing World podcast. Join me each week in conversation with leading permaculture-related educators, thinkers, activists, authors, designers, and practitioners to explore the kind of thinking and action we need to navigate a positive and regenerative way forward, to myceliate possibilities and share ideas of what a thriving one planet way of life could look like. My guests offer voices of clarity and common sense. I'm delighted to welcome Lucy Legan back to the podcast. Last year, we spoke about her book, Planet Schooling, Nature-Based Learning. I invited her back because she's written a free download, How to Start Homeschooling Your Children, a step-by-step guide. And knowing how deeply permaculture and education run in her veins, I was excited to dive more deeply into conversation with her. My kids are mostly free-schooled, world-schooled, and there are so many people I know who are exploring this or wanting to find out more. It was really so great to catch up with Lucy. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. But let me begin first by acknowledging that I'm recording this episode from my hand-built solar-powered studio here on beautiful Gubbi Gubbi country. I'm surrounded here by my permaculture design gardens in a permaculture eco-village. The Sense Making in a Changing World podcast is a project of the Permaculture Education Institute. We teach permaculture design, teaching, and livelihood skills online to people on 6 continents, who in turn localize and enrich it and find appropriate ways to apply the planet care ethics of earth care, people care, and fair share wherever they are. Before we jump in, I'd love to invite you to subscribe to Sense Making in a Changing World podcast on your favorite app and to share it freely. And also leave us a 5-star review and a lovely comment, because it honestly really does help the little bots find this podcast. All right, well, let's turn now to the conversation with Lucy Legan. Well, thank you so much for joining me again on the Sense Making the Changing World show. It's so great to have you back.
Thank you, Morag. I'm happy to be back too.
Last time we spoke, we were talking about your book, Planet Schooling. And since then, you've developed up a huge amount of resources, particularly for homeschoolers. You've got a book out, a digital book that people can download called A Step-by-Step Guide to How to Start Homeschooling Your Children. And we thought maybe that would be a good place to begin our conversation today. So just as a beginning point, how did you get into homeschooling? Like, is this something that you spent a lot of time doing? What inspired you in the beginning?
So it'll be 24 years ago, I went to Brazil and we were going to go for a holiday. And I think I spoke this in the last chat we had, but we ended up staying there for 20 odd years. And I had our daughter who was 6 came with us. She went to school and she really didn't like the school. She could speak Portuguese. She learned Portuguese very quickly, as children do, learn other languages. But she just wasn't liking the format of the school. It was a school where it was quite shocking. They still used a ruler to smack children, and she was smacked and she was horrified because, it was so old school. And when I went to the school, I marched into the school to talk to the teacher. The teacher was like 17 years old. And then I was like, whoa, what's happening is we have a system here where they're just, in areas that aren't, they're semi-rural or very rural, they were just picking up young women to teach kids. So I thought, okay, this, not on my watch. And I said, let's do some homeschooling. So I actually initiated the homeschooling experience for my daughter. And throughout, probably until she went to uni in Australia, she dropped out of homeschooling, went to a school in Brazil, didn't like it, but had a sort of dabble in, had some fun at school, then walked out. So she was a bit of a walk-in, walk-out homeschooler, but mostly homeschooled. And of course, I was in an area that I didn't have many materials. So I thought, well, I might as well make the materials. So it was through lots of practice of homeschooling my child and then homeschooling other children in the area that I sort of developed a plan and realized it really isn't rocket science. It's just having a love of learning that you can homeschool.
You've got a background in teaching, though, haven't you?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And that helped me a lot.
Yeah. In order to develop the kind of curriculum and materials and the, I guess, that meta framework. And so that's kind of what I feel like you've woven into the materials that you developed is that understanding about education and the deep experimentation and bring that together with something you can offer to other people to help, because people who want to start doing homeschooling not necessarily all have an educational background, really want to dive in. So
yeah, that's right. And this is where we offer the support, is that, I think that you need a learning philosophy if you're going to do homeschooling. And there's lots of learning philosophies out there. There's your Montessori, which is very child-centered. There's Waldorf, which is the whole child. There's a classical, as we know, which is like the STEM, science, technology, English, maths. And if you're lucky, you can you can turn
STEM.
it into a STEM and throw the art in there. But most schools work on the STEM. And then you have unschooling, which is just allowing the child. But even unschooling, when I speak to a lot of mums and or parents that say we're going to unschool the child or deschool them, I think they get a bit confused of even the philosophy of unschooling. An example is this: I was at a playground, and a child. I was just watching, my child, and another child used a smaller child as a stepping stone to get to a high spot. So actually stepped on a 2-year-old. And this child was about 8. And of course, my teacher instincts were like, and I turned around, I'm there. And obviously the 2-year-old started crying. I was like, excuse me, everyone, parents, stop. Who owns this child? And they were like, we're unschooling. They'll work it out. And this is where I think the unschooling philosophy is a bit confused, because it's not children working it out. It's you watching what the child is interested in and opening up that experience for the child. So I think that it's really important that if you're going to be homeschooling, that you pick up a philosophy and you learn about that philosophy first, and not just use the Instagram unschooling or deschooling word. And of course, that's me being a bit because I was quite horrified.
Really, I agree with you, and I think there's something that's really powerful about the unschooling philosophy when you take that point of inspiration that you see in your child, where their eyes start to sparkle and their focus is drawn to, and then you kind of wrap around that with a whole lot of other questions, and you engage in that curiosity with that focus. So you keep, expanding, and then they'll get to a point. And I'm saying this out of personal experience, because this is what my middle son does. And he just goes deep into one thing. And I'm there as trying to sort of like broaden the scope that he's exploring through that deep focus.
Exactly.
And then you get to a point and he goes, I've done that. To the next one. And that's okay, but it's being able to be responsive, I think, isn't it?
Exactly. It's that they're absorbing information naturally, and and then they just explode, and you have to keep up with them, which is difficult. I sort of stuttered then, because I remembered an interesting thing with Lila is that we bought her many moons ago. We bought her a really good pair of binoculars, because we lived in a forested area that was quite wild. We had monkeys and all the interesting things that come with a Brazilian forest. And I was like doing my thing, and I really wasn't in the mood to homeschool. So I was actually unschooling her from me as well. So I gave her a journal, and Andre gave her a really good pair of binoculars. And I'd say to her in the morning when I had to do a job, because I was also working, go learn something new today and come back and tell me. And she would come back with the most incredible observations. And sometimes I thought she was like tricking me. I'd be like, yeah, what's this? And then I'd actually look it up, because that was before we had such an easy access to information online. And I'd be like, wow, she's right, And this is like an 8-9-year-old observing nature. And curiously enough, she went into university learning about science and health, which is when I see her natural unschooling way of life. She just fell into something that was what she was really interested in. That was, health. And
can I just ask you there about that transition from this way of learning as a child and as a teenager into university? Because it's a really big question that I know a lot of people are interested in hearing stories of how young people have done that. What was Lila's experience?
Yeah, so Lila, she took a while to go to university because she came out. She first of all, she had never experienced tests or exams at home while she was homeschooling. So from the homeschooling experience, she went into a really interesting school in Adelaide. It took me a long time to find a school because I was still living in Brazil that would be appropriate for her. And it was a school where it's because she still had a bit of an accent, even though she was born in Australia, she lived in Brazil. So her English was, she still would wrap her English around a Portuguese framework. And so I found her a school that had Buddhist monks, that had Ethiopian refugees, that had the brainiest Vietnamese kids on the planet. That was just a wild, multicultural hot pot, and found her, and she just thrived in that.
Yeah.
So then what she did, she did more subjects than she would have to. She did have a problem at first with exams because she'd never sat down an exam, and she didn't realize she was just, doing her stuff, and they'd be like, time out. She'd be like, I haven't done anything yet. I'm just thinking about it. So she had to train herself to do exams, and that was a little bit stressful. But she did lots of different subjects until she found something that she was happy with. She did women's studies. She did DJing. She did, because the school offered so many different genres.
What an incredible school.
Yeah, it was our public school as well. I was so impressed. Wow. It was just a school that just encouraged any culture and every culture to go there. So I was really lucky to find that school, Theberton School, high school. So then she just, she was able to mix with a lot of different cultures. She felt at home and she excelled. So I think that transition, parents really have to aid their teenager to get to where they want to go, even if it means, lots of personal research, because we can't, even though they've maybe had the unschooling program or Montessori or whatever, they, you need to help them step out into the world by giving them lots of options. So it took her, she, after her high school, she was a bit like, oh my God, is uni going to be like that? And I kept saying, no, last year of high school was actually harder than any other uni program. So it took her a while. And then she was like, I want to do this. And I'm there, we'll go for it.
Yeah.
But the horrible thing in Australia is the uni debt. So she dabbled in a few courses, and all she was doing was
accumulating debt. That's right, isn't it? And it's such a shame too that it's so hard to know what you want to do when you first leave school, and the opportunity to dabble in a few things and be really broad and go, oh, that's what really piques my interest. But yet all that, the debt that you accumulate along the way. Yeah, when I first started university, I'm old enough to remember free university for the first couple of years, and then I started accumulating debt after that. But yeah, that was a bit of a golden era of university.
Yeah, that's right. And what's really quite alarming and quite disgusting is that most of the politicians that are in power at the moment, and the previous ones, all had free university. So they were all the ones that had got to where they wanted with free universities. I mean, it's ridiculous that, like, the American North Americans have, their young people have a debt of 100,000 when they leave school. It's really not fair.
Yeah. So let's come back to planet schooling. Then how do you describe planet schooling as a homeschooling approach?
Yeah. Well, one of just going back a bit to one of the things that I realized that Lila experienced when she used to tell people she was a homeschooler, they would put her in a different category. They would put her in the, that she was problematic or this or that. And they didn't realize that it was a choice. So part of my work all these years was supporting parents that children, for children that really want to make that choice. That I don't want to go to school. I want to learn at home.
Yeah.
And expand at home.
Yeah.
And it was that was one of my personal pushes of helping parents educate children the way they want to educate them, but also for the world.
Yeah.
Because I think one thing, or another philosophy I have, is that our children don't belong to us; they actually belong to the planet, and we need to educate children so they continue to be a part of the planet, and they're not rulers of the planet. They're actually partners.
Planet carers.
Yeah, exactly. You know, they're really important partners. So that really pushed the way I wanted to create a homeschooling curriculum. That and what a perfect, you know, your backyard. I'm looking at my backyard, which is a bit messy at the moment, but you know, our backyard is the perfect science lab. I really like science.
And every lab for every kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, for maths, for English,
music, everything. Yeah.
Yeah, it depends, you know, and that was the whole thing. It was that you know, you have all the things that you need probably in your backyard and your house to create a really amazing curriculum. And, you know, and supporting parents, okay, how to do that? How can you, and during COVID, it was interesting. It was like, okay, so how can you have a food garden? Because I know people were, you know, really excited about growing their own food, but learning from that. So you didn't pull your hair out, you know, with your children inside the house going, oh my God, I hate my kids.
Yeah.
But no, you're creating something that the family needed, which was maybe food or calm or a nurturing environment, but in your backyard where kids could learn as well. And then they would also feel expanded and not closed in with this COVID bubble.
So it's a different, we were talking before we started recording about this difference between schooling at home and homeschooling. And I think, you know, during COVID, there was a lot of schooling at home. We were all, I remember at the start of COVID, actually, my daughter was in school. That was one of her moments of going, she did the same thing, in and out of school. She was at this particular school and they sent her home to log on to classes where there was no visuals, where you just had to sit and listen. And it was just, she'd get to the end of the day. And I think she did 6 weeks of that. And then I could just watch her just shriveling. And I was out walking by the river with her one day and I said, you know, you don't have to do this. Like, we could go back to doing what we were doing before and you could be exploring the things that are making your heart sing. And I just saw her, it was like this great big weight just fell off her shoulders of the expectation of having to be there, because she'd got a scholarship to this school. She was doing, you know, and all of that weight just went plop. And I saw her face just start to get some of the features back again instead of this kind of like rigid look. Amazing. And we just said, okay, sure, we'll go back. So the schooling at home is not the same as homeschooling or unschooling or, you know, this sort of planet schooling approach. It's not just doing the same curriculum, but at home in a sort of a difficult way where you don't have necessarily the resources or skills to teach the way that that's taught and have the same assessment and the same sort of pace. I think that was a hard thing, you know, like a lot of parents struggle with, you've got to do this, come on, you know, you've got to submit this, do that, do it. And it's stressful. A lot of arguments I could hear, you know, people talking about how hard it was and how relieved they felt when their child finally was able to go back to school and they could have a different kind of relationship again. Whereas what's going on in the homeschooling environment is a different set of relationships, isn't it? I mean, that's really at the crux of what we're doing. So I don't know whether you want to speak to a planet schooling approach to that.
Yeah, I just like we chatted before, that I'm always telling parents that parents are homeschoolers, whether they send their children to school or not, is that you are a homeschooler, you teach at home, and you can actually create a beautiful foundation for this child to survive in this fast-moving world. Research has shown, the new research, which is a little bit scary. I prefer the old research, but from 0 to 4, before the child goes to school, you've formed a child. Now, old research says 0 to 7, so let's stick to that one. That gives you a few more years. So as the child is with you, you're forming the child. And this formation, this foundation that you help create, if the child doesn't like it, they will spend the rest of their life unraveling that to get to where they want to get to, which is frightening. It's a responsibility for parents. So parents are lifelong homeschoolers, whether they like it or not. As soon as you have a child, you become a part of that system. So what are things that you can do? If you're sending your child to school, how do you homeschool them? You teach them daily routines, which in America they're called chores. And that helps them show that, a beautiful work ethic. You teach them about sharing is caring, about bullying is not fair, is unjust, and there's other ways to communicate without bullying. So when the child finally goes to school, or you decide to homeschool, you have a really nice foundation to start with. And that's super important, because a lot of parents, I hear a lot of parents say, but I send them to school. School should be doing this. No, actually, teaching ethics and the love of lifelong learning starts with the parents, and the school really just continues. A lot of people don't actually realize why schools were formed, and a lot of during the industrial era, schools were formed as a basic babysitting, a giant babysitting concept, while parents went to the factories. And what they were taught, it wasn't to expand their minds. It was as a way of teaching them, okay, when you reach a certain age, you'll also be going to the factory. So it was a way of creating a system that people, the average person, would have to conform. And so when we're sending our kids to schools all the time, because curriculums change every couple of years, and curriculums change in the school, reflecting what's happening globally. So now we know AI is coming in, and AI is really strong. So we can expect that the curriculum will change soon, and it'll change in ways I actually have got no concept how it would change. But I know that they're starting to put ways of finding out how kids are cheating and things like that, which is really, you don't want a school system created the curriculum to make sure your child doesn't cheat. I mean, what's that teaching your child? That it's.
And I think one thing that I've struggled with, and I know it's in there in different ways, but just we know all of the things that are going on around the world, climate change, biodiversity loss, but how much of the curriculum is founded on that understanding? Exactly. And that the learning is in service of cultivating, humans that are able to respond to that and adapt and help to mitigate and all, create regenerative societies. And, those bigger questions are sort of here. They're like sidelined, but not really foregrounded. And I think that for me is
curriculum.
Exactly. That for me is where that but I guess that takes a lot of. I remember, I think one of the reasons too why I ended up saying to my behind the scenes, I'd had an interview with one of the teachers, the geography teacher at her school, and I was enjoying his conversation. Then I happened to mention climate change or something. It's like, oh, it doesn't exist or something. It's like, I think I guffawed at that point and just went, right, okay. So if the geography teacher at this school is saying that climate change doesn't exist, I can see, the meta of the messaging. And I think that's really important. Like, what is the meta message of our education? If we create a learning, like what you talk about with those sort of the living laboratory that we learn within. My middle son, Hugh, who's he kind of at a distance says that he's sort of he supports it, but he's sort of differentiating himself from me. Like he was standing at the sink one day and he was shelling some eggs or something, and he just looked over and said, "Mum, I think you need to give the chicken some more shell grit." I went, "Oh, why is that, darling?" He says, "Oh, well, the egg shells not quite." And I was like, I don't remember the last time you paid any attention to the chickens, let alone know what the chicken would need if their egg was slightly, So it's all in there. It's the conversations that you have on a daily basis, the daily routines and activities that you do. And it's the context, the meta of learning, which is so powerful. And which is what you're saying before, that we are homeschoolers, whether we like it or not, and that context and that frame that we create, that our child grow up our children grow up within,
Yeah.
life is learning, like everything.
Yeah.
Going to the shops, what do you buy? What do you choose? Which shops do you go? What packaging do you choose? What ingredients? Like all of that's learning as well. Yeah.
Like I hear a lot of parents say, my teenagers don't do nothing. They just lay around and, they don't help. And I'm there, did they help when they were children? And they're like, oh, no, I did everything. There you go.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You need to, if you're, and any young parents out there with young children, start young, make it a joyful experience. So then when they become teenagers, it's not like go clean up your room. The child's like, I hear this with Ravi a lot. He'll walk into his room and goes, oh my God, my room is so messy. I need to clean it up. Bang. It's not like
I spent all of yesterday actually with Monty, my 10-year-old, and because actually he for a long time he's a bit scared of the monsters in the dark, or there's night creepers or something. So he sleeps in our room. He has his mattress beside our room. And last night, over the weekend, we decided, maybe, you're 10 now. And so we got in and together we redesigned his whole room, like his furniture got all moved around, the library got reconstructed, everything of it's all gorgeous. And he slept in there last night and he was so happy. And but it was a together thing. I think it's, rather than go and do it, it was like,
And I think what you did, changing everything up, is really important, because maybe the way it was set at position, it created a strange shadow at nighttime. Because I remember that I was also similar, till about 12, I could see shadows in my room moving, and I'd be like, oh my God. And as an adult, I know that it was the cars passing, hitting the light, the tree shining in and creating a shadow, looking like a monster. So it was actually there. But I think mishmashing everything up changes the shadow effects in the room, and the monster's gone.
So he actually redesigned, we redesigned it together, beautiful. And he put this particular cupboard in a way that particular angle that he was afraid of was obscured. And he put all these little things, these little people there. So they created like a little barrier. And then behind that too, on his bed, we put a canopy over the top, and he put some light. So he had light there and his protectors there. And he was happy. But I mean, why I'm mentioning this is because it's that, not just that separated go, like your room is so messy, you just go and clean it up. It's like, okay, well, let's get in and do it a bit together. Now I feel like he's got his art corner, he's got his writing corner, we created a little library niche, like a little spot where he could hide with a book and a little lamp, and he's so happy.
And I think what you've done is one of the first things when you're creating a homeschooling environment is create the niches that they feel comfortable, and then they want to self-learn. And like you said, there's a little cute little reading spot now. So it didn't cost much. What it cost was energy, moving furniture around, maybe getting a lamp or something, and it creates a really nice niche for the child to sit and learn. And you can also do that in your outdoor living space, is creating, we have spaces like we call it the coffee shop, which is basically just a covered area that we surrounded with old windows and a table where, Ravi can sit there and observe the world. And he also has binoculars like Lila had. And, he'll sit there with a cup of tea, herbal tea, and, just watch the world go by. But really, it's a lot of what he's doing is observing, which is, one of the most important things when you do a permaculture course, is the art of observation. Now, adults take a long time, if they've lived in the city, to learn that art. But children, if you give them a couple of tools and the right ambience, they'll learn it and remember it.
There's another little story of Monty. So just for everyone who's listening, Monty, my 10-year-old, has decided that now is the time he's going to start homeschooling. So today, which is very apt, today is the day that he's actually starting homeschool. And over the weekend, he has this fascination with animals. He loves animals so much. His heart just goes to mush when he's around animals. And I said, look, in the garden needs a bit of extra compost and manure. So let's go down to the cows and go and get some let's go do some poop scooping. And his first initial reaction was like, oh, I don't want to do poop scooping. Like, he's done it before, but he's just like, I don't want. I said, but don't. But remember, the calves are down there. He says, all right. And he grabbed his shovel and off we went with our buckets, and we went down to our little collective dairy that we're part of. And so he was there sitting quietly, and he knows to like just turn his head away a bit so that the calf will come up and be curious of him and then develop the relation. And so then, he had a bit of experience with the calves, and then he got out his shovel and his poop. And then while we're there, look, this one, look how much the insects are taking it down, like looking at the dung beetles. And so that was an amazing science lesson. And, how many lessons were in that? I mean, so this is the thing, like, can you walk us through this concept of developing curriculum and trusting ourselves to be able to create really fabulous learning environments wherever we are with whatever we have?
Yeah. So, okay, so let's use that experience that you've gone down and the curiosity is a cow. So we know that we've got we've got our science, we've got our English. Let's stick to the STEM. Okay, we'll stick to the STEM so it's easy. So we've got our science, technology, English, maths, and art is obvious. Art is everywhere. So if we look at the English, it could be like, okay, stories. Looking at the poop, the dung beetle is easy. Let's study the dung beetle. What does the dung beetle do? And then we can go the dung beetle into history, and we know, wow, it comes from the Egyptians. It was sacred for the Egyptians, and then you can learn history about the dung beetle, and then the superstition that's involved, and the stories, and you can start using English and creating stories about the dung beetle, and then the maths is looking at the size of the ball, the dung and the weight of the ball, and maybe the weight of the dung beetle, and looking at the weight difference and the size difference. And so you're playing around with a bit of maths, and before you know it, your son's an expert on dung beetles, which is then connected to poop. And how do we do poop? How do humans composting? How can you compost? And then then the cow has three stomachs.
Yeah, how do the stomachs work? Exactly. How does digestion? What is metabolism?
And then we're looking at biodynamics, the history of biodynamics. And before you know it, you've got so much information. But I do actually have a slide later I can show, and then people are listening, they can pop onto the YouTube channel showing how I do it. Right. It might be apt now to...
Yeah, let's do that. And while you're pulling that up, I wanted to ask you, so I think there's also a bit of confusion. People are worried a bit. So like thinking, okay, so here's where, that cow was a great example of how you could do all that stuff. But what are you meant to do? Like here's the Australian curriculum or whatever country curriculum that says you must do all these things, and here's all the learning that we can do. And how do you match the two, or should you even try?
If you actually have a good look into the Australian curriculum, it's actually really easy to especially if you're looking at primary school first, because you're starting off with your small child. Because if you're homeschooling a teenager, it's a little bit different to homeschooling a primary school kid. So if you look at, like, okay, let's go back to our dung beetle. The dung beetle is part of the soil curriculum. So you can fit the whole soil curriculum by studying the cow and the dung beetle, which is maybe the passion, of your son. Is like, oh my God, I love these cows. I saw the photograph on your feed of his smile, and it actually warmed my heart.
Oh, I know.
He looks so happy. So, you go with that. You go with the cow, the composting, the dung beetle, the poop, and all of that. Now, when you look at the soil science curriculum, it's all in there. What you're going to do is too much. You're actually going to be too much, because school, basically, if you help curate lessons, you should only need about 3 hours maximum, of learnings, and the rest is all experiential learning that the child will have. But the problem is, when you take them to school, the teacher has to deal with Johnny hitting Sally pulling the hair of Anne, and she's the teacher, she or he is curating the classroom behavior to get to that one lesson.
Yeah.
So if you take all that away, the child really, some parents only teach for 2 hours a day,
Yeah.
help orchestrate a lesson. And then the rest is experiential learning. So going out, making compost, like, you're making compost and then you're opening up the compost and looking at it, and you don't even have to talk school. It's just the observation, and the child will go, oh my God, that's what I'm learning.
Yeah.
So you actually,
it's the conversation that's around it too, like the walk down to there.
Exactly.
And the things, the questions, the things you notice along the way, and then what you chat. Like, I know that my middle son particularly learns a lot through conversation. Like, I can't get him actually to write very much, which is something I want to talk about after. Yeah. So maybe let's focus on what you've got here sharing on screen. So yes, if you're listening to this, dive on over to the YouTube channel. You'll see the slides.
That's right. So if we're thinking about a living laboratory in your backyard, so you can fill in your backyard if they love frogs or butterflies or herbs or medicinal gardens or anything. You can see so many, and this is just a tiny bit of brainstorming that children can work with, because I think some children, they'll be like, oh, okay, you're starting the school year, so what do you want to learn? I don't know. Are you interested in something? Not really. And the parent could be pulling their hair out because they can't find anything to connect with the child. So let's say we've got a difficult child. They say, oh, I like manga art. And you're like, oh my God, manga art, what's that got to do with schooling? But then you can break it down with the child. And this is what I do. I mean, this is focused on a permaculture type thing, and you actually see this in the Planet Schooling book of how to do that. So let's look at the food forest, and you can actually sit down with the child, or the worms, which is closer to the dung beetle, which I think would be a fascinating topic. I'm like, ooh, dung beetle.
Well, actually, he was standing over the compost bin with his banana skin yesterday as well. And I'm saying, you know what, Monty, I reckon the worms would actually prefer that. And so out he popped and he went out to the... So yes, those little choices and decisions about where what you feed too.
Yeah, that's right. So we're looking at worms, and then you can actually sit down with the child and look at the dung beetles, and what do you want to learn about dung beetles, or what do you want to learn about manga, or what can we learn? I want to learn how to draw better. Okay, so let's learn about drawing better. So that you map that out, with your manga. Where does manga come from? It comes from Japan. Okay, so let's learn a bit about Japan. Do you want to? Shall we learn a bit of language? How to speak in Japanese? Okay, so we've got Japanese language there too. And so you'll just keep breaking it down until you find enough subjects that soothes your heart as a homeschooling teacher or parent, but also maybe fits a curriculum that you're aligned with, and it fits the love of the child, what the child wants to learn. Living in a laboratory, a lot of kids don't like nature so much. There's a new word that, a new terminology, nature deficient children, which sort of blows my mind out. It's one of those moments that there's children that are actually nature deficient. So if you really want your child to be more in tune, you have to go out early, young, and work through their fears or their dislikes of nature in a really soft, gentle way until they find something in nature that they want to learn, whether it's the love of butterflies. Let's create a butterfly garden. What do butterflies need? How many butterflies visit? How many eggs are, what do they eat? How many eggs are on the plant? And you can throw it out there. One thing about writing, Morag, what I found with Lila is because we were in a Brazilian context, she was a bit embarrassed about writing English. So we used to just create journals. We had a journal for everything. And I cannot... journals fit most people, most children. I haven't met a child yet that doesn't like doing a journal, because it's not just about writing. First, she had a photographic journal where it was old school. We'd take the photographs and we would go to the printer, print them out, and then she would write things next to the photograph. And then once she got bored of photographs, she wanted to draw. I'm like, yes, step up. So she would draw something and write a few things near the drawing. And then it was like, as she got older, she would write more and draw less, and then she would just write. So I have journals of when she was 8, very cute ones, until she was 17, of all her experiences. And sometimes it would just be one journal per term. She didn't have a maths journal or an English journal or something. She would just have one journal that then later you can flip through. It's way easier to do assessment when you have a journal as well, because you can actually look at their work to see if they're actually learning. You see the follow through. I find people that work with single sheets of paper, if you're not into making books, they get lost.
Yeah.
You have a really nice bound journal that the child helps, so they love manga, so they wrap it up in manga, paper or something like that, something that they have on their desk. Lila had about 5 journals. As she was getting old, she had 5 journals happening. And then, once she decided she wanted to go to university, she had her maths book, which was separate, because she thought was her challenge. She thought she didn't know how to do maths until she went to high school and she realized, I know how to do maths.
It's really interesting, isn't it, that, those expectations or those fears that we have with parents, but also the children have themselves. And I think that's sometimes, this question around assessment. I think one of the reasons why Maya did decide to drop into school every now and then was just she wanted to know how she was going. Exactly. And she'd go in and go, oh, yeah, I can do this, I know. And then she was fine again. And or she'd go and sit some kind of regional competition test. Like, I would never send her to go and do that, but she wanted to do it because she felt like, oh yeah, okay, I'm just checking that I'm okay. I'm on track,
Yeah.
And I think that was helpful for her. Whereas Hugh, on the other hand, really couldn't care less about marks. He actually talks about assessments as being not really anything that's useful for his learning. That's really just for the others to kind of mark off that they've kind of done the right thing by me. And he's like, well, it's not real, is it? Like, you're teaching me something and I'm giving it back to you. It's not a real example. It's not anything. And so for each child it's different, isn't it? Like, there's different approaches. So how do you look at assessment from different angles of ways to, like, for you as a parent, but also to be able to, put out to the world, if a child wants to access a certain course or something, you can say, okay, well, this is who they are and what they've achieved. It's a different thing.
I think as the child starts, so we have a young child, then we have a child that's going into primary school, and then we'll go into high school. And I think in that moment of primary, high school, if they need more, before every lesson, you have to state clear objectives with them. What am I going to learn here? What do I want to learn? And if you're really clear with your objective, then after the whole term, you can actually look through their work, and they can look through their work too, to see if they actually achieve the objective. And the objective can be aligned. If a young person wants to go to university, it can be aligned with a curriculum. So with the Australian curriculum, I researched the curriculum, and I was quite shocked at how simple the curriculum is. It's like soil science. Children will learn about earth sciences. Stop. I'm like, oh, I expected they needed to know this. No, they will learn how to differentiate sandy soil from clay soil, and I'm like, oh, that's simple, because in permaculture we do that all the time.
Yeah. And I think too, there's a lot of content that teachers download in terms of worksheets and all of that, but you don't have to do that.
No, it can be
meet the curriculum, which is where this possibilities lens just becomes really super exciting.
And
that's the permaculture lens, because it helps.
Sorry. Like, you have 3 children, and maybe one child is more hands-on, one loves literature, and the other one, loves it all. It just absorbs whatever. And I think that when you know that the child just needs to differentiate, in the curriculum, the soil, well, one child's easy. You just throw them outside and they'll work it out, because they'll just feel it. Yeah. They'll be, it'll be the texture and things like that. Whereas the other child might need the soil triangle, and decide how much sand and how much, and go into the science of it. So you can teach the same thing different ways, but the objective is the same, but the answers will be different. But the answers will also be correct, because the answers will just reflect how they learned.
Yeah. And I think this is part of the key with this, isn't it? That when you are doing this kind of homeschooling or permaculture homeschooling, that you are deeply connected to, you notice what makes that child tick. You notice what sparks them. And so you can shape it. And I really respect it. My mum was a teacher, I really respect teachers, but I know, like you're saying before, they've got a big group and they have to kind of standardize the response. Whereas at home, you can personalize it and you can do that differentiation, like you're saying. And that's really key, I think, because it goes in differently. It lands differently. It gets processed differently. Yeah.
And I think if your child does go to school, that when they come home for school, you have things that I like calling dinner time discussions, where you'll learn a bit. Okay, what did you do today? And they'll be like, I learned a bit of maths and whatever. And you start learning more what they're learning, so you can support that process at school, because it's difficult.
Sorry, Lucy, I asked that question, and the response I get is stuff. Come on, you've got to give me more than that. Don't ask me. It's like, come on. And then I wait, and it's like, I don't want to talk about what I did at school.
I think another way to is like, okay, what was the best part of your day? And sometimes it could be, we did some artwork today, and go, what sort of art? I still life. Because I asked Ravi, what was your best part of the day? And he said, we did artwork, and I'm there. What sort of art? Still life. I'm there. Still life. Really? That's cool. Like,
I find that if I ask them face on, like they just get off the bus, and I say, how was your day? What did you do? That's blank. But if you have something to eat, you go for a walk together somewhere, and just as you're side by siding, they come forward with stuff, and it's about my chilling out a bit too, about wanting to know, like, because you're away for all this time, you have no idea really what's going on in their world,
and we love them,
but also you want to try and find something that's going to connect with what they're doing, that will enhance that and expand it. I've got nothing to go on. Like, give me something.
And I think sometimes talking to them, especially as they get older, honestly, like, I need things too. I'm a parent, I'm not a robot. I'm not AI, even though you'd like me to be one, I'm not, and then you need to feed my my desires and my nurturing and my needs as well. And the kids do respond. Everything takes a bit of practice. And once, because we'll be like, we'll sit at the table. What was the best part of your day? And, a lot of the times it'll be, it was all, nothing. Go, nothing. Oh, well, that was a long, what's in the nothingness? And then things will slowly come out. You find out, they were picked on, or, at school, or they watched some bullying. Because I know Ravi, my grandson, he went from a tiny school to an average size classroom, which in Australia is around between 25 to 35 kids. And he was shocked. So the first week, he didn't want to talk anything about school. He was just like, no, I don't know if I'm going to like this. And he was just quiet, because he couldn't understand the playground rules and the bullying that was happening, and it was really stressing him out. Now that he's understanding how to move around kids his own age, a large group, it's not so painful. But that took a while to talk about, because he wasn't ready to talk about. And like you said, something went on, they're not happy to talk about it, or they're processing as well, like we process. And after a small while, they might talk about it. And some kids don't, because bullying is one of those crazy things that seem to be amplifying in Australian schools, not diminishing.
And there's different ways of bullying too, isn't there? Like, there's the physical bullying, but then there's also the emotional rushing, which is what I feel was happening a bit with my youngest, and I could see him gradually building up walls around him, and just becoming this sort of harder kind of kid, whereas inside he's all soft and gooey.
Yeah, it's painful. It's really painful to watch when a child, you send a child to school and they're just this blossoming flower, and then they come back and already they're wilting. They're supposed to wilt at my age, not they're not supposed to.
I still want to be growing. I'm still sprouting flowers and new shoots all over the place.
I'm a bit like that.
Lifelong learning and passion and curiosity. Something else that you wrote in your homeschooling booklet that people can download. So we'll put the link below because there's a lot of really great content about all this. One was about this idea of finding a homeschool community, whether that be a face-to-face group or even like an online group. You want to maybe just talk a bit about that?
I think for first to support self, because we both joked about this before, is that there were times, I'm a strong woman, I can lift up a 20-kilo sack, throw it in my wheelbarrow and move it down, but my 8-year-old daughter at that time could drop me to my knees crying because she was just being this monster homeschooling child. And I think if you have a community first for yourself, so you can bounce off ideas how to deal with those moments when the child looks at you and thinks you're an alien and you're going to abduct her or something, and all you want to do is teach a bit of maths or a bit of English or things like that, and other parents can give you ideas how to pass that really hard moment so you don't plummet and throw the towel in if you want to continue, because you can also throw the towel in for a while, like my daughter did. She went back and forth, and I was really lucky I was in a system that she could do that. But also I think for other children, because that was so important for Lila, because she was in a community of one child and a lot of young people and a lot of adults. So it was really important for me to find, she used to love horse riding. So she went to an equestrian school where she would find other young people and find community. Now, none of them were homeschooling, because at that time, homeschooling was illegal in Brazil. Now it's legal. So she couldn't find other homeschooling kids or communities. So that was she did it the tough way. But in Australia now, around the world, thanks to COVID, a lot of homeschooling is not illegal now. You can find online groups, you can find little groups, or you can start a group, which is also a great thing, because a lot of homeschooling mums and dads will just be hiding away, and if somebody just has to say, let's make a group, and they all go. So that's really important for the support, and also for the children to have a bit of connection, because as with Lila, because we were in another country where she didn't have that connection, I had to make extra effort to connect her. And curiously enough, she had a friend, a pen pal that back then it was pen pal, that she was another young girl homeschooling in Alice Springs.
Oh, wow.
And until today, they're great buddies.
Oh, that's so great.
It's so beautiful. It makes me go cold. Like they've both had kids, and they both talk to each other, and she comes to visit. And I'm like, this is amazing. This started when she was like 11, sending messages, because there was a group that said, look, I've got a child, you've got a child, let's send cards. So they used to handwrite cards that would cross the world, and they would just talk about things that they were doing. And today they now just drop each other a line. How are you going? What are you doing? I'm coming to visit you, which is a beautiful thing. And that's because they search for community.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be the group in your local park kind of thing, or at a local centre. It can be this. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because we used to try and find little groups or create little groups, and sometimes it worked, but other times it didn't hit the mark. And my kids would go back and say, Mum, I really, thanks for organising that, but I don't want to see those people again. I was like, okay, all right, fine. And then Maya started doing the perma youth and attracted a whole lot of young people from around the world. And there's this one particular girl from Tanzania, and they've stayed in touch for years. And they actually first met just a couple of months ago over in Switzerland, working on a project together. And I just thought, it can be a whole lot of different things.
Exactly.
I'm just
And that's
watching my
lifelong.
son just walk up.
Yeah.
Just walked up to the blood orange tree. He's going to have some morning juice.
Oh, gorgeous.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and that's an amazing. We have a mandarin tree as well in the backyard, and I tell you what, having a fruiting tree for a homeschooling experience is an amazing lesson as well. You fit in so many different subjects.
Yeah,
because
well,
every year the tree offers something else.
So Monty, his first thing this morning, because it's his first day of homeschooling, he woke up first and he says, "Right, let's have pikelets for breakfast today." It's like, okay, darling, right. So we need, and so we started doing maths with that, half a cup of this, a teaspoon of that, and you need to, this is the order. So, the process of doing it. And, we'll need a lime or a lemon you could squeeze on. So he went out and he came back in with that. And then he said, while I was out there, I happened to get a mandarin. So let's have this with it as well. And so it's that inside, outside, all the different lessons that come in with that.
And if he likes cooking, what you create is his very own cookbook.
Yeah.
Is that he'll sit down, like he doesn't like writing, but can you create a cookbook? It's one thing I did with Lila when she decided that she wanted to go back to Australia. I was like, so what about your favorite foods? Who's going to, because I didn't want her to go. I was like, what about your favorite foods? Who's going to cook them for you? And she said, I'll make a recipe book. And I'm there, okay, great. Let's do it. So,
but that's a great idea. Like, he could have taken a picture of his pikelets that he made with his lemon and then written a story about that or drawn it or something. Yeah. So there's a lot. Yeah. It's just, there's too much stuff, isn't it? I guess it's like picking it and creating that balance so that you know that you're covering off a whole lot of things. But I think too, one of the traps that I, in sort of deschooling my brain as a parent educator is thinking you don't have to do all the things every day. Like today might be a really artsy expedition-y day. And then another day might be a real, when you write, sometimes you just want to keep writing. Yeah. And I know, for some of the projects that the others have worked on, they said, I only just get started when the bell goes, or I'm told to put my pen down and I've got nothing, whereas my brain is just started and then I'm on to the next thing. So that spaciousness, I think, is a really important thing to notice. Sometimes they're finished, they're done in 10 minutes and then you're on to the next thing. But other times you just need to be able to flex. And I suppose that's something that's really, again, us observing as educators to notice what's going on.
I think something you just said, I think is really important too, is that as an educator, I think you need to have a few things organized for the day, because like you said, at one moment, they might want to spend hours writing, and the next moment they just want to spend 5 minutes fighting. And you're like, in my head, you're going, but I planned 45 minutes. And the kid's like, okay, I've done it. And you're looking at the work going, you didn't do anything, you need to do more. So then, to have something else organized so they can do that and then maybe come back to the writing.
And think about what the writing could be, like maybe they're not into creative writing today, but maybe they'll be into writing the recipe. And so being flexible in our own self about what our having to deal with my own expectations and then being surprised too when they get far exceeded. I think sometimes our expectations can be limitations. Is what I found anyway.
I think with younger children too, is having pen to paper is actually more effective than writing on the computer. Now, why do I say that? It's because as I notice that as Ravi is writing, the spell check is, going to red, going to blue, going to all these different colors, or the grammar, and it's freaking him out. He's going, it's spelt wrong. I'm there, yeah, it is, but don't worry about it. Just, keep going. But he's a child that he doesn't want it spelt wrong. But if it's pen to paper, he doesn't really care. He's just writing.
And doesn't notice. It doesn't tell him.
Exactly. Yeah. But when you're on the computer, it's just like, it's like the grammar, the blue and the reds are coming in and it's freaking him out. I'm sure we could turn it off, but I'm not that computer savvy to know how to do that. So, I find that I say to him, well, let's get the ideas on paper. And then after that, or after the session, we correct it because he actually goes to school, but he loves doing homeschooling still. So he comes home, he goes, I want to write my story.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So, he's writing his story. But sometimes he stops in that process because he's a perfectionist. And
And then the son, my middle son, the one I was saying who doesn't like to write, I'm going to mention him again and I'm sure he won't mind. There's a gap between all his thinking. He's a huge thinker. He's like a massive, broad scale thinker. But then you ask him to write it down, and he'll get 2 lines maximum. Yeah. What I found was the best way to sort of tap into his knowledge and help him to unload it was not to ask him to write it down, was to be in conversation with him. And so then I said, well, why not? Let's try a different way. If you can speak it well and it comes out speaking, let's do some voice to text. Or
audio, yeah, great.
Speak it into a video. Yeah. Make me a video about something. And then he found that he can actually type it. There was something for him about the writing, but that I didn't discover that till he was a teenager, and the spell check doesn't worry him anymore.
Yeah.
But it is sometimes just really persisting and not saying, oh, there's something wrong, or like you're going to sit here until you've got your 200 words or your 500 words. Like it's just painful for him. So it's like finding the strengths.
I have a book right next to me because I'm really enjoying it. And I think, this actually might be good for children like your son. It's called The Writer's Journey, the Mythic Structure for Writers. And it's basically what every film is based on Joseph Campbell's work of looking at how stories have been told throughout the times from, Stone Age to now, that they follow the same format, and how to write storyboards, how children and how adults and how filmmakers write storyboards that follow the same pattern that we've been using for years. And this is where I think sometimes when children, like you said, have that difficulty of that moment of having this great idea but then putting it on paper, but if they can map it out as a storyboard, as a mythic creation, it just comes out so much easier. I've been playing around with it and I'm like, wow, this actually nice. Work. But it's based on Joseph Campbell's work of studying the way humans tell stories and write stories for centuries.
Yeah, great.
Story, whether it's Shakespeare, or a traditional myth of the Greeks or further back. Yeah, it's really exciting. And that's a great thing about being a homeschooling parent, is that it actually encourages you to keep learning also, because you'll see this a difficulty or a challenge or a blessing that your child shows you, and you go, okay, I need to know more about this.
Yeah, and I've noticed this too, like so my husband Evan, when he's reading about all these different things all the time, and he'll drop in at the dinner table or morning tea or whatever, because we all work from home. We're all this sort of it's that homeschooling lifestyle that I want to chat with you in a minute too. But he'll read something and he'll come and says, oh, did you know I just read this? And it's his excitement, I think, about the topic, rather than just going, like, here's a fact, read this paper. Like, it's his excitement about it. Or if I've just interviewed someone, I'll say, oh, I've just been talking to Lucy and she said, oh, and they'll sit and listen, and then we'll have a conversation. And it's our excitement about learning, our curiosity, and how we're modeling, how we then make connections with something else. It's not just reporting back. It's like, oh, I just saw this and that relates to this, and oh, what relates to you. And when we start to talk in that way, it unlocks something within them, and this excitement as well.
Yeah, you can't be an adult that proudly says, I've never finished a book, and expect your children to finish a book. No. I've heard that a couple of times, and my warning bell goes, and I say to the parent who's a friend, don't say that aloud. But your problem if you've never finished a book.
Yeah.
But if you keep proudly stating, I've never finished I've never read a book, and look, I'm fine.
Yeah. Or other proud
child to read books.
Proud statements of previous achievements, like in the past I was this and I was that. And I think it's about really, yes, talk about that, but bring it into the now and the excitement and how it relates to them, rather than saying, oh, I did that. I remember, like, even around here in the eco village, like sometimes when you come up with this great new idea and this exciting thing, and someone said, oh, we tried that, or we did that before in the past, and like it's just like popping your excitement bubble, poof, it's gone. Like, how can you be in that excitement together and nurture that that love of learning, and that
exactly.
it's
like
even
that.
just noticing the clouds, like what are the clouds doing today? It's like, oh my gosh, look at that. It's so, and then you start to have a discussion about that, and it could even be an artistic one, or what creature, what shapes are you seeing there? Or, oh, look at then you notice some sort of birds flying past, and then you start talking about their life cycle or even noticing what they are and how they fly and the sounds that they make and who are they calling, and it's all that just keeps going.
Yeah, and it is a beautiful thing. I really like that saying, science is art and art is science. Because it's very much like that you'll be chatting about something interesting and a very sciencey person will be like, oh, get real, this doesn't really happen. I mean, how do we know? We're still finding roughly 1,000 different bugs and microorganisms from the Amazon every year.
Amazing.
Do you mean like we still don't know, with all our tech and with all our AIs and all the rest of it, we still are finding things, oh my God, what is this? Because scientists, are getting deeper and deeper into the forest and studying and things like that. And they're still finding out things about, indigenous cultures and, we don't know everything. So I think, what you said is so important, Morag, that we need to, allow the excitement, allow the naivety of life, and leave the harder stuff when the children are older, or if somebody's like bringing you down all the time, just it has to be speak to the hand moment. That what I'm doing with my child, the experience, because a lot of people will say, oh, you're homeschooling, your child is not going to be is not going to
socialized,
society, they're going to be dumber than all our kids and the rest of it. And that's the moment you have to be like, well, speak to the hand, we're doing our thing, you do your thing, and let life unravel and unfold and see where everything goes, because we really don't know.
no, we don't know. And I think it's that thing about trusting that you're responding in a way that makes sense to you and your child and your family and the environment that you have, and and being informed as well.
Very important. And respecting, which is the whole planet schooling vibe, is respecting the planet that we live on. If you notice that your child is has massive amounts of eco-anxiety, or on the other spectrum, nature deficient, that you bring them back to nature, so that their homeschooling experience is holistic, and that's where I suppose planet schooling is. We're earth-based, where we don't follow any religion. Our experience is the earth and how we can live lightly, but also have a lot of fun and learn lots.
So the last question I wanted to ask you about it, because you also wrote about it in your book, but it was about the lifestyle. So the lifestyle of a homeschooling family. What do you describe that to be?
I think part of the lifestyle of a homeschooling family, you need a bit of routine. Now, the routine can be unschooling routine, but in your head that the unschooling experience is creating moments where the child or your children are able to learn. Like you said, pikelets. We're going to have, pikelets, and you do a pikelet recipe, and then tomorrow, the child must say, I want to do pikelets again. Well, should we try banana pikelets or raspberry pikelets? So you're always like setting up to expand a child, because some children do feel safety in just doing the same all the time. And you want your child to be able to live in this expanding world that we live in. But also, I think that another important thing that you've done amazingly is setting up the space, the learning space, so the child can anytime. Because it got to moments with Lila where she would wake up at, like, this was her own trip as a teenager, wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and start doing yoga, and then she would do yoga, and I'm not a yoga person. I'd rather just, steal the extra 5 minutes of sleep in. She'd get up and do yoga, and then she'd go straight to her learning. And I'd be like, who is this child? when she was a teenager, she had her own routine, but that's because her space was set up the way she liked it. And by then she knew what her own personal rhythm was. So she was, as a teenager, it was really easy to homeschool her. I basically just I gave her I think her allowance was around $500 a year for books.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't paying for any tuition or anything. So I'd say, you've got $500 where you can spend on any book. So she had an Amazon account that she would just have things sent to her in Brazil.
Yeah.
So that was great. So she had the experience. But I think also is going back to the lifelong, and what we've both been chatting about is the excitement and the lifelong learning, is that, you need to be excited about learning as well. If you're like, oh, I can't be bothered, or hey, mum, read this is, I'll later, hey, dad, oh, I haven't got time.
Yeah, just a minute.
Yeah, exactly. You can't expect your child, it's a downer. So if you want homeschool and the child wants to be a part of, the routine, the daily life, you have to encourage it. So really, it's just like we've been chatting, it's a state of mind.
Yeah, I know that for me, like I work from home, I run the Permaculture Education Institute and also run the Ethos Foundation charity and all these different sorts of things that go on. But I'm really clear. So I'm saying, when I came up to interview you now, I said, I'm just going upstairs, I'm doing a podcast. And so they know not to come up because, this is the recording studio. So I'll be down as soon as I'm finished. And then we can do the next thing. So
very clear.
Yeah. And that was it. That's all I need to do now. We have built up a culture. That's part of the routine that at certain times. So I'm just going to go upstairs now because I've just got to go and do some emails. I'll be back down at this time. And then, and they've got their list of things that they can continue on and be self-directed. And Evan mostly sets up down the bottom so they can come and go. And that thing about being available and being like, during the time that I'm available, I'm fully available. But there's certain times when I say, I just can't be, this is what I'm doing now. And that's the way that I've been able to manage doing all these different things. People ask me, like, how do you do all this stuff? It's like, I don't try and do them all simultaneously.
Exactly. Yeah. We're multitaskers that stick to one task at a time. It's really important. Yeah.
It is. It's so
important.
To
make the child feel worthwhile that, yes, I'm going to stop everything I'm doing and focus on you now. But I also need time to focus on this, that, and that. But I think,
and I will report back, and they actually ask as soon as I walk down the stairs. Maya will say, "Oh, how was your chat with Lucy?" And I'll debrief, and then sometimes I'll also ask them, "Oh, what do you think I should ask this person?" And they'll give me extra questions, and maybe I'll throw in a question that they've brought into the conversation, or or there's the books. So, I'll probably go down with your book now and show it to Monty because he was saying that he'd like to do all these things out in the garden. So I'll get him to have a look through the book and say, what do you think we should do next?
And then map it out with him. Map it out on a big piece of paper that he can always go back and say, okay, I want to do this part now and I've had enough of that. And you basically train them. I mean, train maybe isn't the right word, but it slightly is too. You train them to start looking for their own adventures. That they don't need you, Mum. What do I do next? Mum, what do I do next? Dad, what do I do? Dad, no, it's like, where do you want to go? The world is open.
So I started this morning just a very little journal, little book that I gave him. I said, okay, this is what you can do for your planning book. So we'll sit down in the morning. We'll write a list of a few things that you think you'd like to do. You don't have to do them in any particular order. There's no time set to them. And then you can just tick off. And so that way we know like where you're up to with things or where you might need some help. And when we look back in a few weeks, we'll kind of be able to see, you can pick up on different threads. And so it's just like it's like a very short diary, I suppose, of learning. And so he was happy with that. It gave him, because we're just adjusting into this for him, it gave him like some kind of framework, I guess. And then, but we're going to start to work to those big mind maps like you're talking about. And that's where we're heading. Yeah.
And they can be fun because then the child sees. And then if you have, like I said, clear objectives, so the child then can assess themselves. Do you think you got to that point?
Yeah.
And they'll be like, oh, not really. I need to learn a bit more. I need to know more about this. And then that they start the auto-evaluation of their own learning, and then that feeds what you need to help them set up. And then also then they feel achieved by the end of the year. They go, yeah, I actually learned a lot, because you keep all that material. And by the beginning, you can go back to the beginning and say, okay, this is all the stuff you said at the beginning of the year you wanted to do. Do you think you reached there? And most of the time they'll be like, we got way more.
Way past that. Yeah.
And then you feel good as an educator and they feel good as a learner. And you both learned a lot of new things as well. So it's only good,
And our house is filled with books as well. Like, you're saying you had your, and so after the years of like all my books and then all the books that Maya got and Hugh got and Monty's had. So actually what we're doing right now, I think downstairs, Maya she loves books. She's going through all the books. She's pulled them all off the shelves and she's reorganizing them. So there's the science books, the art books, the music books, the literature books.
I'm doing the same at this very moment in the lounge room. I just made a mess.
Oh yeah, like the downstairs, I have to tippy-toe over all the books, and so that way he'll be able to walk out of his room and like he'd just be able to pick it. Could inspire him, or it could be something that he could, and that way, and then also just regular visits to the library and different libraries. Yeah,
I was just about to say that libraries we're still lucky because we still have libraries. A lot of cultures have closed. A lot of, in Brazil, you can't find a public library anymore.
Gosh.
In other cultures also, they've shut them down. COVID was an excuse to shut down a lot of libraries. And also the internet was another excuse to shut them down. But we're still really fortunate here. And, I took my 10-month granddaughter to the library the other day, and I put her in the baby section, and she looked around and just squealed. And I'm like, yes. She wasn't
it's so all the colors and the
high-pitched squealing, and started pulling all the books down from the shelf. I'm like, this is the first beginning of a lifelong learner, of a lover of books.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can take out so many books, and I never limit them to just 2 books. Like, let's get whatever we need, and then we can just spread them out across the table and explore them all, and then we take them back and we get another whole suite of them. But I am going to take Monty in to have a chat with the librarian and to find out what are all the other resources that he can explore. So what are all the digital resources they've got? How do you search them up? How do you book books that you can bring in from other branches of libraries? And like if you've got a question about dung beetles, for example, what is the best way that he could make the most of all the resources? And the librarians are so cool.
Yeah.
They would love a child to come in and ask that.
Exactly. They were really excited that a 10th month,
10th
baby was squealing in front of books. They're like, that's so cute. I was a bit embarrassed because it was high pitched and it was, quite alien-like. I was like, And I'm like, no, this is great.
Oh gosh. You've donated a box of books to send across to the groups that we work with in East Africa and the refugee settlements. And thank you so much for that. We have a bit of an issue, though, don't we, of trying to get them across there. We realised how much was it going to cost us to post them?
288 Australian dollars to get, I'm just popping up Planet Schooling book here now if you're watching. If not, you can jump on. So it's a book full of activities. It was created mostly in Brazil. So why do I say that? Because I wanted a book that any school, no matter how much money the school had, or resources, you could create a living laboratory with basically nothing, with just the seeds, a few boxes and things like that. So there's lots of activities that would totally fit a refugee camp, but our challenge is trying to get it over there. So, we need $288. So
just $288. If you can donate, I'll put the link down below as well. And then we can get these books sent across and distributed too. So we have a number of perma youth leaders that we work with here at the Permaculture Education Institute, that they're learning with us, but they're also leading their own programs in a locally adapted way, taking what information they can gather from us and other people around the world and making it real in their own communities for the people they work with. Some are working with young children, some are working with teenagers, some are working with teenage mothers, others are working with grandmothers. And these young people, because pretty much half of people who live in the camps are young, they're half youth. So our focus has always been to support there. So there's throughout all the camps throughout Kenya and Uganda and Tanzania, we've worked with a network who talk to each other. So I'm actually jumping on a call with them tomorrow and finding out what they, what are the resources they need, and just trying to keep feeding information, and then also doing fundraising to support the activities that happen and to help kickstart some of the livelihood activities that can keep things going. But to get information, there is very little in this. Pretty much no books. Some people have access to the internet, but not that many, and downloading things. So actually having a physical book that can be taken to a classroom or to a perma-youth learning centre, which is a permaculture garden learning centre, helping them to create a small library of really valuable books. This is one of the ones that we want to get over there. So yeah. Thank you so much for donating them, Lucy.
No, thanks for the beautiful work that you're doing there. And I think that's a reality that a lot of people don't understand, that still around the planet, owning a computer is a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
Owning a phone that is connected to your computer is a privilege. And, one of the things, because people ask me, why don't you just have this in PDF download? I'm there because, children, they need to hold something. They need to look at it, because a lot of the times it's just going once a week to the, to the shop where you have 20 computers and you have 1 hour to use it if you're lucky.
Like we just take for granted a lot of this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you can help, we appreciate it very much.
Yeah. And, also, if you are homeschooling or know people are homeschooling, and going back to what you were saying before, that we are all homeschooling, Planet Schooling book is such a great resource. Like, if you haven't already got it, I encourage you to get hold of it. Where would people find the book to buy it?
They can connect through planetschooling.com. And because of this chat, we can put a 20% discount, and I'll get Lila, my daughter, who's much more computer savvy than I am. She'll make a discount code as well that we can throw on.
That's so kind of you.
So let's get the word out. We need to
right.
fast, like we always say, we need to fast track to a greener future, as well as have intelligent, creative, happy kids.
Yes, that's right. I mean, when you think there's lots of matters around this. One is that we want our children to thrive, and that's a very personal thing. We want them to thrive in a way that they can grow up in this changing world and really be able to survive and thrive.
Yeah.
And the other side is that we're deeply concerned about the well-being of the planet, and that to maintain that so that we and our future generations can survive and thrive too. So it's this multi-pronged approach, and I think you can't separate them, because we are nature and nature is us, and finding a way that we can live and learn and love with this concept,
for sure,
I think is absolutely essential. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me again. I never want to stop our conversation.
I know, I love chatting to you too. And I always think after, I know if Morag and I were living in the same town, we'd be friends.
Yes, I know. We'd be over in each other's gardens having a cuppa every morning.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, but we don't. So it has to be a long distance love.
Yes, that's right. And one day we'll be in each other's gardens just having a chat. That'd be nice.
Yeah. Great to speak to you again.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Lucy.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Sense Making in a Changing World, a podcast of the Permaculture Education Institute. Check out the show notes below to find out more about Lucy Legan and where to access all the resources that she has. And also check out the notes for where to find details of all of our permaculture courses, our YouTube blog, free masterclasses and film clubs, and make sure you signed up to hear news and updates. And come and join us here at the Permaculture Education Institute to learn practical skills for designing and teaching permaculture and making a good livelihood while living a permaculture-inspired one planet way of life. Take care. I look forward to your company again next time.